An ever so slight allusion to my filming equipment there, or lack thereof. This footage is from NBC affiliate KDLT in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, dating to 1993, or at least the tape does. I don't know about the footage itself. Doesn't suit any great purpose, but I like it anyway. Sets the mood. And it's Ben again from the Oddity archive, and today we're going to discuss the third regular episode of the archive, the TV sign-offs episode, which, dare I say, is one of my favorite episodes. The circumstances under which it was made were not so great. Towards the end of the making of the previous episode, the emergency broadcast salute, I got into a car wreck. Somebody ran the light and right into me, totaled my car, and I wasn't terribly injured, but I was bruised up a bit. And I'm surprised this episode came out as well as it did on the narration front, because I remember just kind of hunching over and clutching my sternum in pain making this, or as close as you can get to clutching your own sternum. This episode marks the introduction of the brief filmed intro, usually with the cardboard box with the picture of some celebrity on the bottom of it. And I'm not sure why I did Tom Cruise there. Maybe I was trying to convince somebody I was cute or something. But after a while, they started to have more to do with the actual show. Or I do an album cover, it just depends on the topic. Occurrences. Let's discuss that long-lost late-night... I think the injury in part led to this episode having a much different flavor than the first two episodes. Not that it wasn't already going to have kind of a different tone to it. I mean, it's sign-offs, it's late night, you're supposed to be tired, and it's supposed to be a little more low-key. But the injury made it even more so. And it wound up being in direct contrast to the first two episodes, which were a lot more energetic and kind of spastic. And the unintentional upshot of that was that not only did it work for this episode, but I wound up really liking it, and I decided to just kind of run with it. I mean, maybe not quite as low-key as this, but to keep going with that because it just felt more natural and it felt more intimate, and I think that works for the archive.
Another day of broadcasting here on
but I do remember that this footage from WCBS in New York, I got a lot of mileage out of that. It wound up being the template, in fact, for the sign-off sketch later in this episode. And to the best of my knowledge, it is the oldest surviving off-air recording of a sign-off, a complete sign-off. And it dates to 1977. I want to say July, but I don't know if that's right, and I really don't have any great way of confirming that. But it's this really ramshackle view. You got mics on when they're not supposed to be, things cut off, and the wrong slides up at some points. But it's actually really charming, and I really enjoyed watching it. And it's on YouTube, WCBS sign-off, 1977. It's a nice little view. And the quality's wonderful to boot. But the constant into the 90s was that there's a lot of times when I'm making the archive that I just want to go back in time and kick my younger self's butt for not saving certain things, not recording certain things. Like during this episode, I just wanted to go back and kick my younger self's butt for not thinking to capture some of the sign-offs and stuff, but you know, I was a kid at the time, so what the hell did I know? This little sequence here is the only thing in the episode that I just really don't care for. It's like, oh, I gotta be funny, but it wound up just being really out of step with the rest of the episode. Remember how sometimes stations would... The main concern I had when I was writing this episode was that there really isn't a whole lot to discuss about sign-offs. I mean, it's just this big ceremonious thing. You know, you got your prayer, you got the national anthem and news and so forth. And I went over it for the benefit of those that maybe didn't remember it or just flat out weren't familiar with it. But that was a problem I remember. This footage here is from the now infamous national anthem conspiracy theory clip. That's actually the doctored print. This is from WFAA in Fort Worth, Texas. It's just that scenic bit. And there's a brief station ID in there too, and it's from the station itself, and I think it dates to about 1972. It's a decent watch. Enjoy. KLAK was supposedly the first radio station in Colorado, but I don't think that's true at all. The other meaning to that is it spells clack, ooh hee hee, how funny. And then channel 13 is supposed to be unlucky number 13, you know. Now, I could have gone the other way with that and done channel 69, hee hee, 69, sex. But the stations that usually did the really big sign-offs were the VHF stations, channels 2 through 13, so 69 and UHF would have made it kind of inaccurate. Now, these little PSAs here are really my first attempts at anything even remotely resembling filmmaking. And a little bit of thought went into the angles and how I wanted it to sound, you know, oh, let's have some reverb here and this part will be dry. And, you know, came out okay. I didn't think enough to turn off the damn autofocus, but, you know, I didn't know any better. This shot was a hard one because I wanted to do a little nod to the crying Indian PSA from the 70s, but I can't just cry on cue, so I had an eyedropper and some water, and I was just holding the camera out in front of my face and just hoping to God that it would run down my cheek in some sort of realistic way. 13. And we've got the editorial reply with the stupid evil boss here. That was kind of an attempt to make the episode a little more accessible, a little more relatable, because I think everybody's had that real jerk of a boss, that boss who thinks he's the greatest, but is just a frickin' moron. Now, I think some decent jokes in this got lost, because I remember when I was making this, I wanted it to be pretty dynamic. And I wanted the gunshot that takes down the stupid boss at the end to really jump out and grab the audience. But it came at the expense of other parts, like at the end where I'm mumbling, and they want to bring back the fairness doctrine. I think that got lost in the cracks because I just had to have that nice little spike there, and I wasn't thinking about how is the average person going to hear this. You know, this isn't classical music here. It's not about dynamics, really. I mean, I'll still do some stuff dynamically if it really calls for it. But, you know, the bottom line is people are watching on their laptops and on their smartphones and iPads and stuff, and they might be watching in noisy situations, and the speakers to these things usually have no power. The headphone jacks usually don't have much power, so you just gotta sacrifice that and make it a little more flat and, you know, unfortunately a bit louder. The final news here, the bit about the wildfires burning, that was straight from the headlines at the time. There were a bunch of wildfires burning here in Colorado at the time. And one of them, I think, actually got into Colorado Springs. I remember it was pretty bad there. He's quoted to have said, "Holy expletive, you're on your own." Holy expletive, you're on your own. I'd really hope the president wouldn't say that. Sports, Sharapova took a ball to the nose. She took a ball to the nose. Oh, I'm so clever. In weather. Hot, windy, and dry, which is precisely what it was in late June of 2012 when I made this. 13. Give Us This Day. This is a straight ripoff of part of the WCBS sign-off. And this is where I started introducing the idea of, well, before I get to that, this footage here is from a meditation segment from WDVM in Washington, D.C. from 1980 or 81. But this is the point where I started adding a lot of jokes. See, it keeps breaking up, and the pastor's name is misspelled, and this is where I wanted to start putting in the idea that this is not exactly a great station. It's run by some not so bright people, not so professional people, and I had a lot of fun with that because I was able to just keep building the gag, and I think it turned out really well. Channel 13. This bit here marks the first use of the now infamous Lady Blue Muzak, Lady Blue by Leon Russell. This is from a Muzak LP that dates to, I think, 1976. Leon's original version dates to 75. The footage here that you're seeing is from KTBS in Shreveport, Louisiana from 1975. It's from a quad tape from the station itself. And it's, it just looks like, some nice home movies when you're looking at it like this. But when you see it in its own original context, before I get to that, the television code, out of practice since 1982, that is accurate. This is also a little takeoff on when they air their legal warnings on the sign-offs. Sometimes they'd put them down in text here. And of course, it just goes completely off the rails the more you read it. But anyway, this footage, when you put the original music back in it, which is an American Trilogy by Mickey Newberry, it becomes this very unsettling view. If you've ever heard that song, especially by way of Newberry himself, it's actually three old Civil War tunes tied together. You got one from the South's point of view, one from the North's point of view, and one from the slave's point of view. And it's this very eerie tune, and it's got this string section to it. It might be a synthesizer, but I think it's actually strings that somebody went back and screwed with distortion in post-production, and it's just this really creepy listen, but it's also worth seeing, and it's on YouTube as well. And we've got the Star Spangled Banner here. That's the only public domain one I could find. And I messed up by making it widescreen. It's not supposed to be widescreen. But the joke was they didn't bother to rewind it last time, and now they're playing it again. And, well, now, of course, it's upside down and backwards. This here is actually unused 8mm film stock, but I wanted it to look like... You got to know that the projector's still there, so even though it's inaccurate, it seemed like the best visual clue I could put in there. What do we do now? Not every station that signed off would go to the color bars or static. Sometimes you'd find stations that would air their own painfully. Oh yes, Nite Owl, which I think I'm gonna have to do a segment in an episode about. I don't think I can do a whole episode about it, but the Keyfax news service has some pretty interesting stories to it. This here is from 1978 on the Jericho, New York Cablevision service. It's from a bit called Cable Chuckles, which aired after sign-off. And it seems to be the only post-sign-off show geared towards children, so I don't know if they were trying to encourage kids to stay up late, or they just assumed that kids had their own VCRs in 1978. But it's kind of weird to watch. It's got all these viewer-submitted jokes, hence the name Cable Chuckles. But what's really funny is that it's got the kids' addresses and stuff in there, and I'm just thinking, oh, that's so wrong. But I guess you could still get away with that in 1978. And this last sequence here with the NASA footage and lonely people. When I was researching this episode, I kept finding requests online for an old sign-off clip that featured Lonely People by America. And I thought, well, that sounds really good. I'd like to see that. I think it's a good song. And I went looking for it, and I searched high and low for it. Couldn't find it anywhere. And it just got to the point where it felt like, well, this is a good idea. Maybe I should just take my own crack at it. I've never seen it. It was before my time, but, somebody's got to do it. And what happened was, after this episode came out and I posted the clip on YouTube, I got all these comments about, well, this isn't accurate. And I'm thinking, well, this was before my time. I even prefaced it by saying, this was before my time. I've never seen it. This is just my best guess. But, I think it turned out fairly well anyway. And the last thing before I go here in the stinger, I really wanted to throw in something from one of the audio-only news briefs. just because sometimes the news items would be just so stupid and pointless. And I thought, well, I've got to have this somewhere, you know. Okay, well, that's it. This is Ben from the archive signing off. I'll see you next time.